In this episode, we're going to lay the groundwork for our combat system. We're going to do this by creating a game manager to track our player state. We're going to build out all of our animations, and we're going to organize our code with a state machine so that we're going to be able to easily add more animations and more types of states later in our game much more easily. So before we dive into combat, we need a way to track and manage our player's state globally. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder. We're going to preface it with an underscore and just call it autoloads. And we're going to create a new script in here called game manager. We can go into here. Let's just save this real quick. So in order to make this a global or an autoload script, we need to go into our project settings. We need to go to our globals. And then we need to go find this file that we just made. So it's in our autoloads game manager. And we want to add. So we're not going to add a class name to our game manager script because this name cannot overlap with any scripts that we have or any class names that we have. And what this is going to do is this script is going to load before anything else in our game. So this loads first before anything, regardless of whether it's the character script in our scene or anything else. This is always going to be the first thing that our game loads up. And so what we're going to do in here, we can get rid of all this code. The only thing that we need is going to be a variable. We're going to call it character. It's going to be of our type character, and it's going to default to null. And we're going to have two really simple methods. First one is going to be register character. It's going to take in, we're just going to call this C so we don't call it character to overlap with variable names. It's going to be of the type character, and it's not going to return anything. And all we're going to do is we're going to assign our character to this character that we're passing into register character. And you'll see how this comes into play inside of our player. And we're going to have a get character method. And all it's going to do is it's actually going to return a character. And we just have to return our character. So inside of our character.gd, the only thing that we're going to have to do, we can tap into our game manager. So now that we have this as an auto load, we can reference this anywhere in any of our scripts. We want to hit that register character method and we just pass in ourself. So that's how we're going to register our character as the character in the game manager. So now we can move into our animations. So let's bring up our character node here, and we can go into our assets, and if you look in this character sprite sheet, let me bring this up, you can see in our sprite sheet we do have this sword sprite as well. So we're going to need these separately from our character. So we're going to need to add a new sprite. So we're going to add another sprite 2D as a child. Bring this up. We're going to rename this to be called our weapon sprite. We need to go into our textures, zoom out a little bit. Let's go into our textures, and we need to drag this full sprite sheet back into it. So our animation, it's going to be the same. It's 12 by 15. So we go to animation tab. We have 12 H frames, 15 D frames. Let's move this a little bit separate. We want to scroll through and try and find our base sprite. So let's just keep, unfortunately, just going to have to click through this until we can find our first sword sprite. Okay, here we go. Our first one, which looks like it's going to be sword to the left. So if we zoom in on this, we go through here, it's going to be, okay, so this is when our character is facing down. It's going to be our sword slash. So it's going to look, our sword will be somewhere along our hands here. And then we'll do something like this, which we're going to animate it in our animations. So let's actually go do this. First thing is we're going to just reset our positions to our character. Ooh, I did not want to do that one. We want to go to our character, and in our transform, we just want to set this back to 0. All these can go back to 0 as well. Now we're going to have to go into our animation player, so click into it, and we're going to make 4 new animations. the first one we're going to work on is going to be attack down. And we're only going to want our sword to be visible when we're pressing attack. So we're actually going to key in on this, and we're going to set the visibility to be off on its reset track. So now anytime that this weapon sprite on reset, it's always going to be visible or invisible when we first load up. But in our attack down, we'll want this to be visible. So this is our animation for attack down now. It's not doing anything, but it shows. And if we go back to our idle or our reset, it's not going to be there. Okay. So now we're back in attack down, and we need to also figure out our attack animation for this sprite. So there's a specific animation for this, and I believe it's going to come after the sword. So give me 1 second and I'll find the frame. I think we're going to be around 48. That's up. Now we need to be a little bit more. Okay, 60. So now we can see, let's move our sword sprite. I scroll through these frames, not of the sword sprite. You can see our guy pushing the sword forward. So it's only going to be 4 frames. 5 frames. Okay, 5 frames. We'll do the snap at 0.2. And we need to key our sprite frame in. So let's go to our sprite. We're going to key in frame 60. We also need to key in where we want to place this. Okay, so let's go back to 61. We want to be at the front, and our sword is going to be here. So we need to key the position of our sword here. Okay, now let's go to our next sprite, our next frame. Go back to our character sprite 2D. We're going to key in frame 61. You go to our weapon sprite. Oops. Our weapon sprite, and we want to move it forward. So we're going to key in this position. Then we can go back to our player sprite, key in the next frame. Same thing with our weapon sprite, move it forward. Key in that position. These are in the wrong positions. Let me click and drag them back. And in here, we need to key in the next one. What are we at? Okay, so the next sprite should be 63. And in here, we're going to move our sword up a little bit. Key in that position. Go to our sprite. 64. Okay. All right, so now here, in our last one, we want to move this up a little bit more. Okay. So now you can see what's happening here. So this isn't what we want our sword to be doing, but I just wanted to show that when we're doing this animation positions, or our sprite positioning, it's going to move while our animation is moving. So now we set the sprite position, but we also need to set the sprite frames. So right now, that's fine. Let's go to the second frame. Then in the second frame, we want our weapon sprite to start looking like this. Sorry, we got to key in the first frame also. Then the third frame will be 98, 99, 100. We probably should have done this in a little bit different of an order, but that's okay. This position looks okay here. Oops, we already had that key in, so we're going to key the position. And this next one, we'll move it here. This one, move it a little bit more over here. And then lastly, it will be back to our normal sword. Okay. All right, so now we have a sword swipe animation. It doesn't look perfect, but I think if we speed this up, it will look a little bit better. So let's make everything at 0.1. Then we can highlight all of these, highlight these 4 nodes. I'm going to move them all up. Okay, so now this position didn't save. We want it to be maybe over here. So let's key in this position. And then at the end of this, we want it to go, we want the sword to go away. So then we're going to key in the invisibility right at the end. And it looks like our animation is going to be 0.4. And we're going to want this, we'll do 0.5. So it disappears at the end. So now let's play it. All right, that looks a little bit better. It's still a little slow. We could probably bump this up to 0.05 on the snap. Let's just see what that looks like. Okay, I think that looks a little bit better. So just as I did for the other animations, I'm going to put the exact frames for everything on the screen, but I'm going to fast forward to this so you don't have to watch me just key in a bunch of different numbers. Okay, so now that we have that set up, the next thing we want to do is we need to add a input mapping to actually be able to use this. So we can go to our project settings, and go to our input map, and let's just call this attack. And then I'm going to use left click on my mouse button. You can add anything else. You can also have multiple inputs for anything. So if you also want this to be spacebar, you can do that, and that will correspond to all of the buttons that are listed underneath each action. We're going to move and create something that we're going to call a state machine, or is called a state machine. And this is going to be a singular place that we can manage all of our states in one concise and expandable manner. So we have idle and move right now. We want to add attack. We might have other abilities that we want to give our player. And the reason we're going to create and separate this out into a state machine is if we're in our character script, we would have to handle animations and keep expanding on this. We will have to have variables for if we're attacking, if we're moving, if we're using an item. We want to be able to separate this out so we can keep our character script a little cleaner and more manageable, and also build something that we're going to be able to expand upon easily. So without a state machine, our code and our character could get really messy and really, really hard to follow down the road. So while this might be a little bit painful to set up now, it's going to pay off as our game progresses and gets bigger. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into our scenes, or we're going to go into our character scripts folder, and we're going to create another folder. We're just going to call it state. Inside of that folder, we're going to make a script, and we're going to call this our state. We're going to create another script, which is going to be our state machine. And this will be enough for us to at least get started. So first thing we're going to do in each of these, we can, in our base state, we're going to get rid of all this code. We're going to give it a class name of state. And let's do the same thing in our state machine real quick. Inside of our state, we're not going to need the boilerplate code. We're going to give one variable, which is going to be our state machine. It's going to be of the type state machine. We'll default it to null. And then we're going to have 4 methods in here. We're going to have enter, which is not going to return anything. So all these are not going to return anything. I'm going to copy and paste this. The second one is going to be exit. So this is what we're going to do when we enter and exit each of our individual states. We're going to have a physics update. Pass in underscore delta, which is a float. It's not going to return anything. And then we're going to have handle input, which takes in a event, which is an input event. And it's not going to return anything. We can pass. So each of these methods are going to be designed to be overwritten if they're necessary in each of our individual states. So in our idle state, if we need to, we're going to rewrite the enter, rewrite the exit, and if we have anything to put in here, we'll put them in there. This is just our base state class that all of our other states are going to inherit from. So now let's go back to our state machine, and we can get rid of these comments, but we are going to need our ready methods. We can actually get rid of the process. The 2 variables we're going to need is going to be our current state. We need to track this, which we can default to null. Then we're going to give it a states variable, which is a dictionary, and we're going to default it to an empty dictionary. In the ready method, we're first going to do an await on the owner.ready, just to make sure that everything has loaded properly and we're not going to be moving on our state machine or initializing our state machine too soon. Then we need to loop through all the children of this state machine node. And we're going to create a state machine node inside of our character. So this will make a little bit more sense once we do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to loop through every child in get children. So this will ultimately be our idle state, our move state, our attack state. That's what we're going to be looping through. And then we're going to see if a child is of the type state. We're going to get our states dictionary, and we're going to do child name to lower. So we're going to lowercase it. We're going to assign the child state to it. Then we're going to do the child state machine, and it's going to equal the self. So we're going to assign each state to the state machine. So each child is going to have the state machine. So if we go back to our state, we're assigning this for all of our children states. And then whenever we're starting in our first state is always going to be idle. So we're going to do if our states dot has idle, we're going to change our state to idle. Okay, and this is a method that we are going to make right now. So the change state method is going to take in a new state name, which is going to be a string, and it's not going to return anything. And we're going to see if we're in a current state. So if we are in a current state, we're going to exit that current state. So we want to make sure that we're only going to be in one state at any given time. And if our states dot has our new state name, we're going to change our current state to the states at the new state name. So this current state, this states, since we're accessing it at this key, the value is going to be a state. So we can just leave a comment actually, and we'll just show like what this is going to look like. It is going to be idle, and then it will be something like idle state. So we're accessing this new state name. If we're passing in idle, we're going to be assigning current state to the idle state. Then we want to actually enter our current state. So we do current state.enter. Otherwise, we are going to do a print error. So we're getting an error. State, new state name, not found. So just giving us some debug output, showing us that we're trying to enter something that doesn't exist. Then we need to make our physics update. Just going to get delta and a float. We'll return nothing. We have if current state dot physics update. We pass in the delta, and then func handle input. We get an event, which is an input event. Void if current state dot handle input, and then pass in the event. Okay, so this is all well and good, but we actually need some states to work with now. So we're in our character, and we're going to create a new node, and we're going to call this state machine. We can assign our state machine script to it. And then as a child of this, we're going to make another node, and we're going to call this idle state. And these are nodes because that's what we're extending here. So both state and state machine are nodes. So now that we have this, we don't want to assign our script, our state script to this. We're going to attach a new script called idle script. Let's make sure that it's saved in our right folder. So it's going to be in scripts, characters, state. We're going to save our idle script, or idle state script. And we need to give this a class name of idle state. And it also needs to extend state. That's a very important part here. So now we go back to our state machine. This is what I'm saying when we're looping through for child and get children. We're going to be looping through all the children of state machine, which for right now is just idle state. And we will be giving it the state name. We're going to assign it to lower, give it the child, and then we assign each child state machine to the actual state machine. So we're all in the same state machine. So in our idle state, we're only going to have two methods. We're going to have our enter method, which doesn't return anything. And we're going to have our physics update method, which takes in delta, which is a float. We don't return anything. Okay. So now this is where our game manager, the importance of this and registering our game manager's character is important. So this bit is important. So now we can go into our idle state, and what we can do is we can go into our game manager dot character. So now we have access to that. And then we are going to want to access our animation player. But we're going to make a new method inside of our character script where we're going to do play animation, and then we're going to give it idle underscore, and then we're going to give it the game manager dot character dot get direction name. So we need to make two new methods. We need to play our animation and get direction name. This is just going to help us more easily assign idle down, idle left, idle right, and then play animation will just handle that for us. So let's go handle that real quick so we don't get any errors here. So we go to our character script, and under physics process, let's make a method called play animation, which is given an animation name, which is a string. We're not going to return anything, but all we're going to do is if we have an animation player and it has an animation of the animation name, we're going to animation player play the animation name. So this is just a little bit of a safety check to make sure we're not giving it anything that we don't have. But in order to fully make this work, we need to also get direction name. And this is going to return a string. So we can actually yoink some of this code here. Let's just copy this and put it in here. But what we're going to do here is instead of all of this, we're just going to return the string of left. Okay, then we're going to return right, and so on for all of these. Okay. I need to make sure that these are properly indented. So now when we go back to our idle state, this is all hooked up. If I Okay, yeah, I don't want to use a comma here. I need to do the plus, so we're only giving it, I was adding multiple variables by using that comma, so now if we just have this plus, everything will work. I'm going to go back to character, and I'm actually going to copy this line. We're going to go back to our idle state, and this is going to be the first variable here. And what we're going to do is we're going to check if direction doesn't equal vector2.0. We're going to go into our state machine. We're going to change state and move. And the reason we can access state machine here is because in our state, we've assigned it this state machine. Then we are going to do a check on if the input dot is action just pressed, and we want to pass in our attack, and the character can attack, which is a variable that we will be adding to our player shortly. We go into our state machine, change state, and we're going to give it attack. And we should also, let's rename the node name to just be idle, since that's what we're expecting here. We're not going to add idle state. We can call our script idle state, but let's just call our node idle. Just so we can get rid of this error, let's go back to our character, and we are going to add a variable that is can attack, which is a bool, and we're going to default this to false. We'll also add a variable called is attacking, which is a bool, and we'll default this to false. Actually, all right, the can attack should be true, because we should always be able to attack at the beginning of any when our character set up. We can always attack, but we are not attacking yet. All right, so let's go handle our other two states. So for right now, I'm just going to duplicate idle twice. Let's detach the script from these, and we are going to have move and attack. So let's attach a script here. We're going to call this move state. And let's make sure that it is in our proper folder. And let's also add a script called attack state and make sure it's in the proper folder. You can give these class names to attack state, make sure it extends state, and move state, same thing here. Not extends, extends state. And we're going to need some similar code to our idle. So let's should save this. We should have we can't use game, we can't just use character. We need to do game manager dot character can attack. That's a very important part, because that's how we're going to reference our character via the game manager. So let's copy this, and we're going to go into our move state. And we're not going to need to do anything on enter. But in our physics update, we're going to need this again. And I think since this is going to be something that we're going to be referencing a lot, I think we should put this inside of our character. And we're going to make this, we're just going to call this variable direction, which is a vector2, and it can default to vector2.0. And instead of doing the new variable here, we're just going to assign direction like that. And then now we'll be able to reference direction via the game manager .player. So in our idle state, instead of getting this variable direction here, we don't need that. We can just do game manager .player .direction. And since this physics process is running every frame, this is going to be constantly updated. So back in our move state, we aren't going to need this either. But we're going to check, we need our game manager .player .direction. And we don't want to check if it doesn't equal vector2.0. If it does equal vector2.0, we're going to pass in the idle state, and then we're going to return so we break out of the physics update loop. Otherwise, if we're not idle, we're going to get our game manager .character .last direction, and we're going to get our game manager .character .direction .normalized. So we want to normalize our movement. I'm going to copy game manager.character since we're going to use that a lot. So we tap into our velocity, and we're going to use our game manager's last direction times our speed. And then we move and slide. And then we're going to play animation. It's going to be move underscore plus game manager.character get direction name. And then this can actually stay the same because if we're walking, we still want to be able to attack. And then we can go to our attack state. And in this one, we are going to want several of these methods. So we can actually go back to our state and let's just copy these. This is just the base, so we can copy these, replace these. The only one we aren't going to need actually is handle input. And when we enter, I actually want to save our game manager dot, or I want to make sure I have this copied since we're going to need that. And in our enter method, we're going to change our is attacking boolean to true. We're going to change our can attack to false. And we need to make sure that our weapon sprite is visible. We shouldn't need, we could, tap into an onReady variable of our weapon sprite, but we are handling that in our animations, so we should not need to do that here. But we do want to play our animation with the attack underscore plus, and then we need to get our direction name. Then on exit, we need to reset these variables. So is attacking will be false, and then we will do can attack equals true. So we might eventually want to build in a cooldown so our guy can't just infinitely attack, but I think we're okay for right now. And then in physics update, if we are not playing our animation, so if not game manager animations player is playing, we're going to go into our state machine, change state, and go back into our idle. Now, in order to completely hook this up inside of our character, we can actually clean up a lot of this. So the only things that we're going to need, we're not going to need handle animation anymore. That's handled in our states. We are going to need a reference for an onReady variable to our state machine. And then in physics process, the only thing that we're going to need to have is our state machine dot physics update, pass in the delta. We still want move and slide, which I think we had move and slide in our move state. We shouldn't need this. If we run into errors, we can come in and add it back, but we're going to be moving and sliding regardless. So let's see if this can work without that. And then we're going to need to add our unhandled input default method here. We go into our state machine dot handle input and pass in the event. And that's all we're going to need here right now. So you can see how this is going to simplify a lot of our character script, where we can keep our core functionality to our character inside of this script while separating out each of our states. It's just going to keep this a lot cleaner and make this much easier for us to build on in the future. I know we've written a lot of code. Let's actually see if this works. So let's go to our test level, which should be this one. I want to move our character to be back more in here so he doesn't just pop up over there. And let's play this. Ooh, not game manager.player. So this needs to be character. I don't know why. I'm used to typing in player and I decided to name this character. So forgive me on that one. Okay, so my attack works, but I can't move. Oh, I deleted the direction thing in our physics process. So we need to be assigning direction equal to our input dot get vector. We need move left, move right, move up, and move down. So I wasn't assigning that, so we had no input for us to even move. So we should be able, I'm going to comment this out for right now just to make sure. But let's go back and play this. Oh man, did I do this all over the place? Let me do a quick search on game manager.player. Okay, yeah, I did that. This was the last place I did that, so hopefully we don't get any more errors right now. And now I can move. I can attack. Nice. So it's not like the cleanest attack. We can always shore this up, but I think this is a really good place for us to stop on this video. Except when I press move, we don't actually go to vector 2.0. So in our idle state, we do want to set on enter the vector 2, the velocity to equal vector 2.0. So every time we enter the idle state, we're changing our velocity explicitly to vector 2.0. That should solve the problem now. So when we go and play this, our guy stops moving properly, and now we can attack, move around. This is coming together a little bit. So I think this is a good place to stop. This was a pretty long and code-heavy episode, but we need to fix some collisions here and then z-indexing here, but good to know. In the next video, we are going to be adding an NPC in this section here where we can interact with him. We're going to defeat him and then allow ourselves to enter the cave. And I think we'd like ourselves to be able to enter the house as well.